Welcome to On the Bench. I'm Chris Nee, joined by Colby Crawford. We're going to talk a little recruiting here because came to realize we've kind of neglected that this month. That's pretty normal preseason. Focus is more on football than recruiting. But with the season rolling around, I figured it's a good time to get back into it. Also, 24/7 just dropped their top 100 for 2029 class today. Another good piece to talk about. Before we get to that, I want to thank our sponsors Chattanooga Whiskey, 2026 Craft Whiskey of the Year. Tennessee High Malt, experimental batches, single barrels, whatever you want. They've got really good product, really good stuff. You can check out their website. You can reach out to us. We can direct you. Fan of the product, we'll always suggest multiple things. And I've come to realize, having friends drink different varieties than I do from them, if you got something that's sort of your thing, they probably got something that's going to satisfy that. Also, the Turner Group, who does take it or knee it now, which I'm still uncomfortable with, but Trey's making me do it, so I'm sticking with it. Colin and Amy Turner of the Turner Group can satisfy all of your home buying and selling needs, also renting. They're based out of Central Florida, but they help throughout the Sunshine State. Great people. I always suggest it on Instagram. I think it's a great way to kind of show the business they are, the people they are. They're personable people. They're very hands on. They care about the people they work with, and they also do a ton of business because they're really good at doing business. Again, if you got any questions, reach out to us and we'll help direct you to the Turner Group. All right, Colby, where do you want to start? Should we talk weekend visit since we got a little list we're working on compiling for 2026?
Yeah, I think kick it off week zero, not week one, week zero. New Mexico State sounds like they're going to have a ton of prospects on the sidelines of Doak Campbell for that one. So, yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think right now we're at I think we have about 20 listed roughly. I'm
I think,
expecting that list to double. I'm expecting around 50 as of right now for that
if not,
weekend.
maybe even a couple more than that.
Yeah, I think that's just one, it's week zero. There's not a ton of games.
Yeah.
Two, it's a decent kickoff time in the sense of the ability to get to and from Tallahassee for a game for people coming out of town. And three, it's the first game of the season. It's sort of just the anticipation kicks in. Who's somebody you want to highlight from that weekend? I got a couple guys in mind, but I figured I'd give you the floor first and let you speak on a person or two that you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, one that stood out to me is Malik Muhammad. He's someone who obviously camped at Florida State this summer. One from up there in Sylvester, Georgia. We saw him, and during the camp, you're like, he was wearing number 0. You're like, who's that guy? Because he just looked like a freak of nature. Someone who is in the footprint of obviously Florida State. They've had good connections with, and to get him on campus first time, I know he's going a couple other places. He actually just recently added a Nebraska visit. Texas A&M's doing a really great job with him. But I think Florida State is right in the mix there. So obviously, a lot of what we're going to talk about today depends on the results of the season and kind of what stems down from that. But I think that's a big one. And as well, to pair with it, they've got a couple commits coming on campus. So Jackson Holly, Chase Brown, and Troy Scissorbond, 2 of the 2028s are also on campus.
Silberzon. Great
Silverbell.
last name. It should be a decent weekend. As of right now, I think we have about a half dozen top 247 guys, mostly in the 2028 class on that list. Xander Edwards, who's an awesome player from Bowles. He's a running back, very talented guy. That's a guy that FSU is definitely playing catch up for, but he's going to give him a shot out of the gate. If FSU has a good running game, I think it might help their case a little bit with him, but he's a guy that they're trying to catch up to Miami. His dad played at Notre Dame. There's a few ties there for him to other schools that probably are winning out right now. Malik Muhammad was funny enough, the first name that came to mind for me if I was going to speak on it. But I'll talk about Jackson Flowers, actually a teammate of Xander Edwards at Bowles. Jackson Flowers is a safety target for FSU. He camped with FSU in June, and FSU was actually his first offer. He's now got about a half dozen pretty serious major offers. Auburn, I think Florida. I forget some of the other ones off the top of my head. But really like Flowers, just a big kid, athletic kid. We went and watched him practice when we were over in Jacksonville for FSU football practices, and I really liked him. One other camper from this summer on that list, among a few, is Michael Morgan from Lake City, Columbia.
Yep.
He's a talented edge. He was awesome at camp. He's just one of those guys that, I don't know if they liked him a lot when he walked through the door, but Nick Williams loved him when he was on the field working for him, and they offered him on the spot. And he's a guy that I definitely think they want to continue to pursue. I will say, with putting together the visit list, the way it always works as we're talking to these prospects this time of year, I'll use Chandler Dyson for an example, talented quarterback from South Georgia that FSU is heavily involved with. Dyson, there's plenty of others that are similar cases, have told us, yeah, I intend to come to games. And for some, proximity is easier, so it's sort of like a day trip. They can easily do it whenever they can do it. but they don't always have it sort of set which game it will be. So we'll get clarity as time comes towards us. We also usually get a little bit of a heads up on some of the expected guys that are coming in each weekend. Obviously, FSU has 7 home games this year. Some of the scheduling is a little bit weird. SMU's Monday on a Labor Day. Big game, they're number 19, I believe it is, in the AP top 25. But with it being a Monday, it's a little bit complicated for some prospects because Tallahassee is not the easiest place to get to and from.
Especially on Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, so it can cause some issues with regards to those prospects that do care about going to school on Tuesday or who have families of that sort, things like that. I think the weekends at FSU will probably build up eventually are Virginia, which is the first weekend in October for FSU. It's a normal Saturday. I think it's just one of those that kind of comes at the right time. We'll see what FSU is. That's their 5th game of the season, so they could be anywhere from 4-0 to 2-2, probably looking at the schedule. And then Clemson at the end of October is one that they've had circled for a while. The Clemson thing, it's a little bit of a we'll see if they get there and if it works out like they hope it does from the plan standpoint. Their hope is to be basically batting above the average of what most people are projecting for them on the year. So that is going to be their 8th game in a year. So if they're an above 500 team at that point, having some success and having been through a decent portion of the very difficult part of their schedule, they're going to swing for the fences. They're going to try to, go back in on some 27 guys that they like and try to get them in that weekend and kind of take a swing and just see where the chips fall. That's and I think if they get there and they're able to do it.
They already have, I think, close to double-digit blue chip guys on the docket. Now, like I said, this is very fluid, but I would implore everyone to head over to Knowles 24/7. We've got the running list there, which is just kind of easy to track, and we'll give updates as more players add, as more players drop, because it's fluid. Guys are going to schedule and then say, oh, well, my game got rescheduled to Saturday. I can't make it this weekend. It's going to bounce around a ton. But I think Chris makes a really great point. That Virginia weekend, hopefully you're banking on early October in Tallahassee. When it's finally going to be perfect fall weather here, or maybe what they're hoping for. They're in early October. It's not scalding 90 degrees. They're on August 29th. And then also, I think that Virginia game, but Clemson especially, that's one where I think you'll have a pretty good read on kind of where the stature of the program stands, and if they can take swings on 27 guys, or in layman's terms, are you doing more damage control?
Yeah, it's sort of the tail of the season will tell us what that weekend will actually be for them. The intention going into the season is to circle back on 27s while also aiming high on 28s. Currently, most of the names we have down are 28s. I think from a 27 perspective, Majay Thompson, who's already committed to FSU, is about the only name we have. But I do know there's 6 to 10 guys that they're kind of keeping warm that are either committed elsewhere or still out there on the board that they would like to swing back on. But that's all. Who are they when they get there? Can they actually do it? To be determined. From a 28 perspective, you got some pretty heavy hitters. Antonio Thomas Jr., one of the better players in the country, top 247 edge. I think he's about 15 in the rankings for 28. Mm-hmm. Dalen Powell, who I'd argue is probably their top running back target currently in 28. Giovanni Tuggle, a safety that they absolutely love. Zion Dobson's a DB that they absolutely love. Another one. He camped
at the first Seminole Showcase too. He had himself a day, had quite a few conversations. We'll see where they like him. Talks with Blue Adams, but might project at safety if he can pack on more weight. But he had a good first day on May 31st at FSU for the Seminole Showcase.
Yeah, and Scooter Green, who we went to see in Jacksonville at Reigns, who could play receiver or DB for them. He camped as a receiver this summer, is another guy down for that weekend. So Clemson's clearly one that they're hoping to turn into a mega event, but FSU football has to be good enough to allow them to do so. We could be talking very different storylines come October 27th as we're previewing that weekend than we are right now. But the intention going into the season is for that to be really the weekend of the season for them. To circle back a little bit on SMU, we don't have a ton of names at this point. Again, it's Labor Day. It's a little difficult. I will say 2 of the names we have about as good as they get. Cameron McGee, literally the best player in 2028, is supposed to come in that weekend. He's swinging for the fences there. And then Prince Che, who's from up in Thomas County Central in Thomasville, Georgia, who's just a mauler at defensive tackle. He's a top 247 player. They're both guys that you've already confirmed Kolby for September 7th for the SMU game. So
Prince Che's one where, and not to look past the number one player in the class, but with FSU's current standing, it's impressive to get a guy like that on campus. Barry comes through, but I think Prince Che's one locationally if the season turns right, that's when they're in enough. And if you can prove it, that would be a big landmark recruit, I believe. Someone along the trenches that has been extremely, extremely impressive on the prep circuit. I think it's also notable that there were potentially talks of official visits this weekend. With it being Labor Day, we'll see that likely is going to shift back to Virginia, maybe Clemson, as you kind of touched on there, Chris, but you can expound upon that.
Yeah. So Zachary Johnson, who committed to FSU, is one that he's previously mentioned to us, and he's recently reiterated that he expected to come in for SMU for his OV. I don't think that's going to be the case as of right now. I think the intention is more so to probably move it to the Virginia weekend. Some of that is just the logistics of managing a game weekend and an official can get kind of complicated. And they like to have a lot of time with their visitors on officials. Game weekends aren't really where they love to do officials, and that's been true under Mike for several years. But I think Virginia being a more normal weekend versus the Labor Day situation is probably going to play out. It's not a certainty that he'll get moved off SMU, but I've been told to expect him to get moved off of the SMU weekend. Yeah. Also think Mishai Dobson, who's edge that committed, who's a teammate and friend of his who has yet to take an official, probably ends up the same weekend as him.
Yeah, so, working to find a date on that one too.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting. The lightest weekend that we have currently is Central Arkansas, to be expected, probably the worst game on the schedule, truthfully. And then Florida game, with it being Thanksgiving Friday, it's kind of a short list. That will grow. Yeah. And again, sort of similar story to Clemson. That's all dependent on who and what they are. We get to week 12, 13, game 12 and week, 13 or 14 for FSU.
Week 14, yeah. I think it's 2 buys this year. But you got a couple return visitors. I believe that's Zion Green's second visit. Yep. Obviously, we saw him at Reigns. Jackson Flowers' second visit, I think, as well. Or maybe his first, but still.
No, Flowers is supposed to come to the open, so it is a second.
Yeah, so it's a second. And then not in-state, but in-city, Isaiah Vickers from Florida High right down the road. He'll be making that trip as well. So shorter right now. And I think that's a lot of people trying to plan out Thanksgiving plans, that's always a complicated one, but still a pretty quality list there for the in-state SmackDown showdown.
Yeah, recruiting visits this year will be interesting because so much of it, like obviously out of the gate, SMU is sort of what it's going to be. But after that, it's very much going to be TBD by how FSU is doing as a football team and what's going on with regards to people running the program and all of that. Moving on a little bit from visits, we'll keep updating that list. That's one of those things we're going to do constantly. We'll have in-depth previews prior to home games with regards to visitors. We'll obviously have follow-up with guys who step on campus for visits. That's something that me and Kolby aren't going to relent on. We constantly work on that.
Never been.
We will work on that from now until Monday after Florida. That's when we can rest easy after doing that. And then it's a few officials and signing day. And God only knows where we're going to be from an FSU football perspective at that point of the year. Can't wait. All right. Transitioning a bit today, the national team for 24/7 Sports dropped the top 100, the next wave of difference makers, as they put it, for the 2029 class. Kolby highlighted a handful with regards to FSU. I'm going to talk a little bit real quick about number one. Number one in that group is quarterback Ryder Flugents. Call him a quarterback, but he's actually listed as an athlete with us. He's played quarterback. He's played safety. He's played a few positions. My only experience with him was mid-June. He came to FSU. I think it was June 14th, I want to say, for one of the individual camps. He got offered by FSU that day. He worked at quarterback, and he looked really good. He stands out. He's definitely one of those guys when he walks onto the field, you take notice. He's measurable, wise, noticeable, throwing a football, noticeable. Like, just a lot of things to work with. Truthfully, I've not sat and watched this film because, he's a Texas kid who's number one in his class. So, there's a few to go through for FSU to have a shot there. So I'm not investing a lot of time yet. But very talented young man, did step on campus here this past summer. We'll see if he comes back at some point during the season. I think he's going to obviously be a kid that the big heavy hitters financially in the in-state schools probably they're going to be at the front of the line. So Kolby, like I said, you highlighted 5 today on the site. People can go read about all 5 of those. I don't know what you want to nitpick out of that or point out or talk about, but the floor is yours.
I'll talk about a couple. One that I think sticks out, number 10 player overall in the country, Kamani Nicholas. He was at the first Seminole Showcase on May 31st. He was extremely impressive. He was one along the D-line, and obviously that's Florida State's premier camp. So they're bringing in a lot of their top targets, top prospects that they're looking at. I mean, he went up against I mean, I know I embedded in the story the play against Carson Campbell, the son of Cody Campbell, but he was just relentless in drills. You saw Nick Williams almost like salivating working with him, and he continued to show that through one-on-ones. I think he only lost the one rep to Campbell, and Campbell quoted him as much, saying, "Well, that was a load to block." So I thought he was extremely impressive, and he's only continued to grow since then. He just picked up an A&M offer, I believe, yesterday, and I would expect that recruitment to continue to expand, as he goes into his sophomore campaign. Another one, as you go down the list, Caden Oakham from up in Mallard Creek. Man, I was talking with him on the phone actually earlier today. They've got quite a schedule there, but they've got a pretty good roster, and he came in. We'll see if he stays as an edge rusher because he's going into his sophomore season. I think he's maybe close to 265, but still does not lack burst, short area quickness off the edge. He camped it was a big man camp over the summer, but he forgot pads or something. He was making a whole trip up and down the East Coast, was offered straight on the spot by the staff. Extremely impressive as a 29 kid. I mean, I remember that was a camp with Corey Bennett, a couple of 28s from in Mississippi, and I still think he was probably arguably the best of that bunch overall. So someone that's extremely impressive, comes in at number 69 in the nation, has working on locking in the UNC and A&M visit, but he's got Georgia on the docket, NC State, a couple other schools. But FSU has done an incredible job early. He really liked it. They impressed on that camp visit.
Yeah, you brought up Kamani Nicholas first. I loved him at that camp. If I recall, that was the first showcase at the end of May.
Yeah.
He's just he's a big kid. We have him at 6'4", 285. I think that's ballpark of what he measured in at FSU. But he can play a multitude of spots. What stood out to me that day is like you look at that build and you think that's an interior dude. That's probably a 0-1 type of guy. He could do some things as like a big DN. Like he is athletic enough at this stage of his development where he could do that. Really stood out to me. He's ranked 10th overall by the rankings. He's the 4th prospect in Florida in the rankings. Total in the state of Florida, and it includes IMG, obviously. I think there were a dozen in the state. That kind of speaks to the talent. The truth is there's going to be more than that, probably in the top 247 as far as revised top 100. I would bet the number reaches more like 15 to 18. Xavier Corbin is one you didn't write about, but he is among the top in the state of Florida. He is Jay Sean Corbin's little brother. He's at Ugali down in Melbourne, Florida. Just a really, really talented 6'1", 185 athlete. He's a guy that FSU offered very, very early on. Hasn't been here a bunch since the recruitment portion of it started. I know he's been here in the past when his brother was here, I believe. But Corbin is one that I'm interested to see if FSU is able to make a move with. And James Allen, who is the number 2 ranked prospect in the state by us. I think he's actually number 1 overall by On3 in their early 2029. He's number 3 overall in our rankings early on. Talented kid, big corner, 6'2.5", $175. He's a dude. He's at Carrollwood Day where like Antonio Thomas that we talked about earlier, visitor wise, also a player there. James Allen's awesome. Like I'm not a big fan of comparing people to people. James Allen reminds me in a lot of ways of Jalen Ramsey. And I went there. I did that. But like I like him a ton. I just think he's ultra talented. He's athletic. He's physical. He's capable of doing a lot. He's good at playing on the ball. He checks a boatload of boxes. He is an extremely highly talented cornerback. He's probably the best cornerback I've seen in that class without me flinching on that thought at all. Yeah, he's a hell of a football player. He's a guy that FSU's had some early involvement with, but again, he's going to be as nationally good as they get. So, yeah, early rankings are early rankings. Some of the kids will soar up, some will soar down. A lot will stay relatively ballpark of where they are early on. I'm always interested in it. We're always in a rush to do them, but there's also an element of there's a lot of kids in that class because we're talking about basically what will be sophomores this coming high school season that still have to emerge, play varsity, and just
never hit the field.
As someone with kids comparable ages of that, man, they grow fast sometimes. Like, things change pretty rapidly. But I liked early rankings overall. A few guys really stood out to me that I've seen, whether it's FSU camps or just for whatever reason, I've been able to watch them in person in some form or fashion in recent years. Not a whole lot else, really. Like, we have 28 rankings, obviously. Not going to really delve into that because they're not as recent. But, FSU, I do think it's worth mentioning. FSU at this stage with 27, they have There's 17 commitments as they've had for a good while now. Class is ranked 35th overall. Class is led by the likes of Tayshaun Poole and Sam Lejeune. We've covered that class in depth. There's not a lot of storylines with that group right now. We'll see what the season holds for FSU. That's what will create movement with that group, either good, bad, or ugly. As we mentioned earlier, really the only ones in that group who haven't OV'd here is Zakari Johnson,
Meshie
Michai
Dobson.
and then the kicker as well, which kickers have names and it's Vance Phones or Phones. I'm not 100% sure how to say Vance's last name. He has not yet been here. So those are the three guys remaining. The one guy in that class who honestly is like a dangling question is Connor Wynn. I'm surprised they haven't moved on from him. We'll see what the plan is there. I think some of that all comes down to the health and capability of the young man to play football at the next level, which has been a question mark for him for the last year, actually more than a year.
Outside of those guys, though, and before you say that, Chris, I will say now a lot can change, and I know we've been relatively down on the standing of the program as we talk about the season and kind of what looms around. But for what is going on, for what recruits are seeing on social media, to still, and like it was like the official visit. The official visit list looked really impressive, and then a lot of those guys didn't end up making it to campus. I think for right now, they've put together pretty solid prospects overall for the game. So to this point, so I think they've done a pretty good job there.
Yeah, all in all, the guys they have committed, I don't really have a lot of negatives with that group. I think
I'm talking about the 28s, like they're getting the visit.
28s? No, they're doing a good job there. Sorry, I thought you were sticking with 27s there. Like I love Tayshaun Poole and Sam Lejeune in that group.
Yeah.
28s, yeah, but like that's what you're new to this, Kolby. That's what FSU does. Early visits aren't a problem for FSU with good prospects. They get a lot of them. The issue is kind of lasting power and being there at the end and having the negotiating power and the financial investment to do what it takes to get high-level prospects this day and age. That's where you sort of see what played out for FSU in June, where, they hit on some. Tayshaun Poole, long-term prospect for FSU. They nailed that. Sure, it wasn't cheap, and it was a really good win for them. No knock there at all. But they have to pick and choose battles they can win. And in recent years, it's been limited in that regard. But they've done a good job with 28. In general, with 28, they're kind of refining their board. They're figuring out who camped with them, who's been here previously for a game, who came in during the spring, who's coming back. Those are the guys that they're investing time and effort into. And that's sort of like the focus right now. And then it reshuffles itself as names start coming off the board, going elsewhere. 29 right now is more like the offer group. That's the group that they're obviously going to offer a lot of guys nationally. Everybody's evaluating it more currently. So is schools internally, including FSU. And we've seen a decent amount of offers go out there. And as publications such as ours put out lists,
more will get sent
offers
out.
tend to follow. So that's sort of the like staggering of the classes. 27 is about retention and maybe adding a few pieces. 28 is about figuring out the board and who they can actually attain and what they actually want. 29 is about just scatter shooting with some offers and then starting to get them on campus for visits. And that's what plays out during the season. I mean, season visits are weird. When kids come in for a game, some don't arrive till damn near kickoff. So there's not a whole lot going on there other than watching a football game. Others arrive earlier in the day and they go to like the IPF.
Hang out at the facility and,
Norvell get over there as well as assistants. Yeah. They run around, they try to shake hands, introduce themselves, have conversations. Some offers get extended, so on and so forth.
It's game
a
day.
lot of the support staff does a lot of work in those moments.
And students, I'll say student interns and such, like they carry the brunt of that on game days.
Yes. A lot of men and women that you don't see a lot outside the shadows do a lot of the, connecting with them and their families, walking with them to like legacy walk, back to the IPF, into the stadium, onto the sideline, having conversations. There's some interaction when they're on the sidelines, usually with coaches and staff. And then it's watch the game. And then after the game, some get to the locker room. A lot don't, probably, because there's only so much space.
Depends win versus loss, too.
Yeah. So, like, game weekends are weird. Like, we make a lot of game visits. And I think game visits are important, especially because sometimes they induce an emotional reaction that will have lasting power with a young man. But at the same time, like, you're not able to invest a great deal of time to truly recruit in the nature that FSU likes to recruit. FSU is much more, they kind of like having the ability to spend time with a prospect. It's why most officials for most schools are now June.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the season from a recruiting perspective. I want to see the lasting power FSU has with 27 if they're able. If they exceed expectations nationally, I want to see if that has any kind of bump for them. and then lay the groundwork for 28 and what they're trying to do there, and kind of see who emerges for them. Again, a lot of early work invested in that class, but it doesn't always turn out to matter in the end. I guess that's really my closing thought on the whole recruiting subject. You got anything you want to add?
No, I think that was a good rundown. I would just emphasize again, it's a running list, but definitely it's a great resource at this time if you want to check names and different prospects. So it's over there. It's pinned up on the message board, 24/7 Sports, Knowles 24/7. Go check it out. 60% off right now. No better time.
Yeah, use Knowles 60 to get that 60% off. That will run through the end of this month, basically for kickoff for FSU. And like I said, we're going to have plenty of previews about recruiting prior to New Mexico State and every other home game they're going to play. Me and Kolby will get on here or in the general OTB that we do on a weekly basis and certainly talk some recruiting. And we'll always have follow-up where we have interviews with guys, some tidbits, some information, and then so on and so forth with all the things that come with that. So for Colby Crawford, I'm Chris Nee. Thank you for listening. Relatively brief OTB, but we just wanted to touch on recruiting since we had neglected it a bit over the last month. Everybody have a great day and go Knowles.